There are so many different lures on the market, and one that we don't hear a lot about anymore is a floating jerkbait. Well, floating jerkbaits have been around a long time. I remember when I was a kid, everybody was throwing the Rapala floating minnow, and we just caught a ton of fish on it. But as the years have progressed, there's even a lot of manufacturers out there that have discontinued the floating jerkbait out of their lineup. But it is still a great lure that can find fish, and there are situations where it really excels at putting fish in the boat. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, this one here happens to be an old discontinued model that I have that is actually a plastic one, but I do have a lot of balsa wood floating jerkbaits as well. But let's discuss some of the situations where I might pick one of these up. Now, that's actually kind of perfect right here. We're sitting out here on a river system, and we're in between the saddle of a couple islands, and we've got some really shallow vegetation. Like it's just a few inches here and a couple feet out here. Well, a floating jerkbait is wonderful for that type of a situation because it can stay above that type of cover. Now, as you might notice on the retrieve here, I do things a little bit differently with a floater. With a suspending jerkbait, we know that we have that rip type of a situation. Well, with the floating jerkbait, its natural action of just reeling it is really pretty enticing. It's got a really nice, narrow, tight shimmy and wiggle to it. So I'll do a start and stop type of a retrieve like this, or I could mix in a few types of twitches as well. Just twitch it a little bit, twitch it, reel it, twitch it, but I'm not giving it that really powerful jerking type of an action as I would with, let's say, a suspender. I kind of just give it small twitches, and it still has a tremendous action in the water column. Now, something that is probably my favorite part of fishing a floating jerkbait is that it can pause. And it's a lot like fishing a popper. You can go ahead and pause it and leave it sit. And then let's say I'm coming up to a limb that's just submerged a little bit under the water. I can go ahead and come up to it, bring that floating jerkbait to it, leave it rest, and it will float up. And then I can come right over the top of it. And for those bass that are just kind of sitting there in that cover, man, a floater is just sometimes too much for them to take. I like to think of it a lot like topwater fishing. I approach it very similar to, like I said, fishing a popper or some other types of topwaters. It's like a finesse type of a jerkbait, because you've just got all these situations where you can pitch it around really shallow stuff, and it's a very visual lure for the angler. It's fun to watch. Most of the strikes that you see are visual strikes, and it's another option for anglers when they're up and around really shallow cover. And of course, we know that floating jerkbaits come in many sizes. You got your small little ones, a couple inches, 2.5 inches, all the way up to those that are 5-6 inches long. And so, you know, match the bait fish that you've got in your particular body of water, match the color to, like, if you have perch or whatever it might be, minnow colors. You know, your standard minnow color is always an excellent choice for a floating minnow. And like I've mentioned in a lot of videos lately, I'm always trying to find something that maybe others aren't necessarily using, especially if you're on a really heavily pressured body of water. And a floating minnow is one of those lures where you might be the only one out there throwing it. And I know for a lot of us that have been, you know, fishing for a while, we've probably got tackle boxes absolutely stuffed with these things, and they're just sitting there collecting dust. Go ahead and break them out when you've got vegetation that's just about up near the top and you got some logs you're working around. Floating minnows can be really deadly around boat docks because you can sit there and just leave them pause and rest right underneath those floats and, you know, just really coax those bass out of there. But there's really not a wrong way to fish it or retrieve it. And that is what's so fun about it, is you have so many options as an angler. If you would like to watch another video on just a great shallow water lure, go ahead and check this one out right here on how to be a better fluke angler. I think that you will find it interesting. And hey, don't forget to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.